Scientists search for the cause of an outbreak of mysterious disease in New Mexico. They track it down in the alleys of Baltimore and charge into the homes of Puerto Rico in pursuit of a stealthy killer. We're in a life and death battle against invisible enemies. Infectious microbes are finding human flesh is the meal of choice. Next on Discover Magazine. A nuclear holocaust has been our worst fear for decades. Prophets of doom have now raised the specter of a different kind of holocaust, a swift and lethal plague that no vaccine or drug can stop. Is such a nightmare possible? While no scientist believes that entire cities could be wiped out, a menacing threat to human life is re-emerging. Deadly viruses, bacteria, and parasites are returning to haunt us. Every corner of the world is now within reach. Exotic microbes can travel from the heart of Africa to New York City in a single day. In a world of changing climate and surging populations, microbes are finding new openings to infect us and spread. It's a battle, us against them. We've already engaged the enemy here in the heart of America on Navajo Nation lands. The outbreak was fast and fatal, taking the young in their prime.
He was an athlete. He had been previously healthy. In fact, he was in excellent physical condition. When I came to the emergency room that Friday, I was shown the body of a 19-year-old Native American. The doctors told me a little bit more about this young man, and they said that he had been brought by ambulance from the small town of Thoreau, which is about 30 miles east of Gallup. They rushed him to the hospital with CPR in progress, and when they got him here, the doctors continued a resuscitation protocol, but they weren't able to revive him.
1, 2, 3.
Except for some flu-like symptoms, headaches, fever, muscle aches, vomiting, he didn't really have any medical history at all.
Looks too young to have a pulmonary edema, right? Let's give him the atropine and flush it through, okay?
Heart rate's 47.
Okay, well, blood pressure's going down.
He was the kind of person that a lot of us wish that we were, because he was very healthy and very athletic. He was a runner, a track star.
Air entry into his chest at all?
From talking to his family, I realized that he had fallen ill 3 days earlier with these flu-like symptoms, and that he hadn't worried much about it initially because he thought he just had the flu, and as most people know, there really isn't too much you can do to treat the flu except to wait it out.
Everybody clear? Could it be myself? Okay, I think we should call the code. Dave, Cheryl, you agree? Okay, all right, let's just disconnect everything. I'm afraid it's gone. There's nothing we can do about that.
I found the family in one of the small waiting rooms here at the hospital, and I sat down to talk to them, and they said they were on their way into Gallup to attend a funeral. And I thought, oh, that's terrible. And then a little bit farther in the conversation, I asked them whose funeral they were coming to attend, and they told me that it was this young man's fiance's funeral. And I thought, boy, that is tragic. So I asked them what happened to her, and they told me that she had died of almost identically the same thing 3 or 4 days earlier. And it was then that I realized that something was going on, because the two cases were so closely related. The chills went down my spine, and I asked them to tell me a little bit more about that case. And they told me that she was 21 years old, was also very healthy, was a runner in her own right, and that up until the time that she got sick, 3 or 4 days before her death, she didn't have a medical history either. And to make matters worse, they told me that her funeral was scheduled to start in 30 minutes. And as soon as the funeral service itself was over, we took that young woman, the young man from the emergency room, and we rushed them by ambulance to Albuquerque.
Pathologist Dr. Patricia McFeely took charge of the bodies.
When they came in, they didn't look that different. I mean, they were both young people. She had been embalmed and was ready for burial. He looked like a very healthy person, but who had died very suddenly. So there wasn't anything that gave you any special clues or made you suspicious of anything. We looked through some of the blood and lung specimens that we had and really went through the whole bank of tests that we could do for known diseases. It wasn't plague like we thought it might have been. It wasn't a meningitis like it could have been. The things that you would think both would kill somebody very quickly. And so when we didn't find any of those, we were a little surprised.
The body is that of a well-developed, well-nourished young adult Indian male who weighs 173 pounds and 72 inches in height and appears compatible with the stated age of 21 years.
Both of them had heavy lungs. They were filled with fluid, and they were kind of floating in fluid in the chest, which was really abnormal. They weren't in a position to have heart failure or something, which is the kind of time you'd see that. They also had some bleeding into their stomachs, and so we were concerned that they had maybe taken a poison, probably unintentionally, so we were concerned. And it was really frustrating. And you feel like, how come you're not smart enough? How come you can't figure this out? This shouldn't be this hard.
New victims of the mystery disease soon followed. Within a week, 2 more family members fell ill, then others around the city of Gallup. Was this the beginning of a major outbreak? The sick were flown to University Hospital in Albuquerque, where doctors confronted a fast-acting illness unlike anything they'd ever seen. Some thought the disease was spread only by the Navajo, but they were quickly proved wrong. One of its first victims and few survivors was Robert Heron.
I knew I wouldn't make it unless I got to Albuquerque. The hospital in Gallup had not the care that I needed. I knew it was too late to pray. And I said, Lord, whatever you want is fine with me. They started plugging me into all sorts of things. They gave me a paralyzing drug that would help my system relax, help the muscles to relax, and so they could breathe, take in the oxygen that was being rammed down my throat. They, later that day, thought I had a heart attack, which later the heart doctor said it was just the fluid in my lungs that was stopping the heart from beating. And over the next 6 days, it took 4.5 gallons of fluid off my lungs.
The mystery grew. As the suspected case list mounted to more than a dozen, state health experts met in emergency sessions. Dr. Gary Simpson was a leader of the task force.
After a fairly involved facilitated discussion, we really arrived at 3 possible diagnoses of etiological agents. One of them was influenza A, and although there wasn't a strong sense that this was likely, we still all remembered that in 1918, 1919, that influenza pandemic had killed hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world. And there was influenza A in our community at that time. The second was a possible viral hemorrhagic fever agent. Now, there had never been viral hemorrhagic fever agents causing illness that we knew of in North America, but it was a family of agents that could kill young people in this very rapid manner. And the third was either some unknown infectious or toxic agent that had never been described before.
The state turned to the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta for help. CDC tested blood samples from victims against hundreds of infectious and toxic agents. A virus was the chief suspect, but which one?
beginning Monday on Wild Discovery. The coldest, harshest, most amazing place on Earth. So cold. Feeling chilly? Settle in and turn up the heat. Frozen World on Wild Discovery. Beginning Monday at 9 Mountain, 8 Pacific on the Discovery Channel.
To you, it looks like this. To a car thief, it looks like this. And to our Ford Motor Company engineers, it looks like one of the most powerful anti-theft devices ever. Only this key sends an electronic code to the engine before it will ever start. So it looks like your new Taurus will be just where you parked it. Ford, quality is job one.
Were you my mom's best friend in school?
Yes, and now that we're best friends, I brought you a present. Look.
It's a phone number.
Friends and Family is offering everyone in America their own 800 number as our gift to you.
It lets special people in my life call me as often as they want without it costing them a penny.
Call now and get 100 free minutes.
I'm giving it to you because when I pick up the phone and you're there, it's like opening up a present.
Friends and Family. Real savings, real simple.
You know, FedEx and the Dream Team have a lot in common. They're fast, we're fast. They've got moves, we've got a few moves of our own. We both spend a lot of time in the air. They get called for traveling, we travel when we're called. They're masters that gravity-defy and slam and jam and foul line dunk. Well, okay, so they got us there. FedEx, proud sponsor of the USA Basketball Dream Team. Neat, huh?
Premiering next on the Discovery Channel. A creature long dead is brought to life and all myths are dispelled. A portrait of the ultimate monster, the ultimate guide, T-Rex. Beginning next, only.
It's Gonzalez Madness here at Gonzalez Chrysler Plymouth Dodge Jeep Inigo and Espanola, and we're offering some really crazy deals.
Like our exciting Dodge Stratus, only 99 cents over invoice.
Like all our Plymouth Breezes, only 99 cents over invoice.
Like all our 96 Dodge Dakota Club Cabs, only 99 cents over invoice.
And our Dodge Dakota 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive pickups, only 99 cents over invoice.
It's madness. Come in and save during Gonzalez Madness sale here at Gonzalez Chrysler Plymouth Dodge Jeep Inigo in Espanola.
Tear through the sky like thunder and lightning. The awesome power of the Air National Guard.
Navajo healers were also searching for the cause from their own perspective. Their traditions say that health depends on a delicate balance between forces in the universe. When that balance is upset, retribution is required, and the price is a life. The agent of retribution is a tiny but respected creature, the mouse.
Among the Navajo, the mouse figures in a major portion in the creation story where when the world was first being formed, the mouse went to the four corners of the world carrying seeds, and it's considered, in a sense, a creator itself and lays claim to all that has come from that.
But what could a mouse have to do with the mystery disease? Navajo healers had seen outbreaks like this before. In 1918 and 1933, high rain and snowfall swelled streams and produced abundant spring growth. There were bumper crops of piñon pine nuts, a food staple for mice. Their populations exploded. The result was increased contact between mice and humans. According to Navajo tradition, mice and humans represent two powerful spheres of influence that should remain separate.
In this world, humans live in a day cycle, and they sleep in their hogans in the evening, and mice, on the other hand, they sleep in the daytime and they wander around throughout the outside world, but they must never enter the hogans, or illness will occur when mice come to contact with humans and spread contamination. There is an old saying that when a mouse runs over your clothing, you must burn it, and nobody could understand why, but when I asked a healer, they said, well, when a mouse runs over your clothing in the middle of the night, the chances are that it's frightened, and it's probably leaving a spray of aerosolized urine, and that will fall on your clothing, and there's a good chance that you may become very ill or die if you don't burn that clothing because it's contaminated.
Meanwhile, the CDC was reaching a similar conclusion from a radically different perspective. With help from biosafety labs, they identified the infectious agent as a Hantavirus, a viral hemorrhagic fever. It usually targets the kidneys, but this form attacks the lungs. The virus lives and reproduces in rodents. Scientists have a simple theory on how it jumps into humans. When rodents enter human dwellings, they shed the virus through urine and feces. When unsuspecting humans enter that space, they stir up infected dust and breathe in deadly virus particles. A virus depends completely on the living cell for survival. Hantavirus evades the body's immune defenses, and eventually a living cell embraces it. Inside the cell, Hantavirus springs to life. It uses the cell's energy and internal machinery to make countless copies of itself. The cell releases those deadly replicas to invade the rest of the body, targeting small blood vessels. For reasons not yet understood, the virus causes the vessels in the lungs to leak, quickly drowning its victim in fluid. The strategy is fast and relentless. To prove the mouse connection, biologists from the University of New Mexico and the CDC trapped rodents and tested them for infection. Protected in biosafety suits, the team carefully sampled the region. Biologist Terry Yates led the investigation.
This new species of Hantavirus occurs in a mouse called the deer mouse. The deer mice are rodents that occur in almost every habitat in North America. They're very common. They live in this pinon juniper type habitat. They also live in grasslands and on tops of mountains and in river valleys. An extremely common rodent. They come into people's houses, especially in the fall of the year when it starts getting cool, or in the spring when the young are born and they start looking for new places to live. They are likely to come into somebody's house to live, especially if there's a lot of good things to eat there and nice places to make nests.
We got a maniculitis over here. What'd you get?
So if you're going to have a mouse to live in, Hantavirus couldn't pick a better one than the deer mouse.
Many local deer mice carry Hantavirus, but aren't killed by it. Factors such as changing weather patterns can make it easier for the virus to jump from mice to humans. In 1993, New Mexico once again had an unusually mild, wet winter and spring. The food supply for mice increased, triggering a population explosion. But the problem isn't confined to the Southwest.
We've had human cases of this Hantavirus in 23 states now in the United States, and the mouse literally lives throughout most of the North American continent. So anyone sweeping a dusty cabin highly infected with deer mice is at risk from catching the virus.
Over the course of the outbreak, 115 cases of Hantavirus were confirmed nationwide, most of them from the Southwest. Of these cases, 59 died. Rainfall returned to normal, and rodent populations shrank, reducing encounters between mice and humans. But Hantavirus isn't gone. It's still lurking in the background.
Because of its remarkable clarity, Cellular One is the nation's #1 cellular service, clear across America.
For years, I dreamed of seeing Venice with my boyfriend, Tom. I'd whisper about palazzos, gondolas. All he'd talk about is deadlines and business meetings. Finally, I went and booked 2 romantic weeks on the Grand Canal with my Visa Gold card. Tom was completely surprised.
Scusa, ma chi è questo Tom? Visa Gold. Purchase power to make dreams come true. It's everywhere you want to be.
Most people work hard to get to the Olympic Games, but some lucky people can get there just by picking up their phone. Now with every AT&T International direct dial call you make from home, you get a chance to win a trip to the Olympic Games automatically. Every AT&T call is another chance to win. Besides, pressing these is a lot easier than pressing this. That's your true choice, AT&T.
Imagine you're on a journey. How will you get there? Does it matter? Yes, it matters. You're on a journey, and the journey is the destination.
Premiering next on the Discovery Channel, a creature long dead is amazingly brought to life, and all myths are dispelled.
Opportunistic scavengers or vicious predators.
Travel back 65 million years to learn the truth about the most misunderstood creature ever.
Tony Barrett or Tiny Lizard King.
A complete portrait of the ultimate monster, the ultimate guide, T-Rex. Beginning next, only on the Discovery Channel.
Far from the desert Southwest, Baltimore seems an unlikely place to find Hantavirus. But Hantaviruses infect many rodents, including the rats that live here. Biologists from Johns Hopkins University are patrolling the neglected alleyways of Baltimore to assess the threat from rodents.
What do you think about over here?
Yeah.
Gregory Gurry Glass is known to local residents as the Rat Man.
Norway rats or brown rats are found in all the major urban areas in the United States, and studies that have been done in Philadelphia and New Orleans and Houston as well as Baltimore have shown that rats there are infected with hantaviruses, and we suspect probably everywhere that these rats exist, they're infected with hantaviruses.
Yeah, just listen for the noises.
Well, hello there.
Oh, yes, Chris.
Each night, Gurry Glass and his colleague pursue their quarry. And each night offers up qualified subjects for his study.
This is a Norway rat. This is what's also called the brown rat, or Rattus norvegicus, or all those other things. And what you can see is this is sort of the typical rat that you find out in the alley. He's got a big gaping wound here that he picked up. He's been bitten on his hands a couple times. He's got a big abscess here. He's got a big bite wound here. I think just, that they manage to survive under the circumstances that they do. Having to live that way is at least interesting, if not lovable. At least you can sort of respect them a bit.
Blood from Baltimore's rats revealed the first evidence of hantavirus in a large American city. It was different from the southwestern strain, and most rats carried it. But had it made the jump from rats to humans? And was it causing disease? Gurry Glass drew blood from a sample of Baltimore's residents and estimated that over 2,000 of them had been infected with hantavirus at some time in their lives. Because most hantaviruses target the kidneys, Gurry Glass took a close look at people with serious kidney disease. The picture was alarming. People with serious kidney disease were 10 times more likely to have been infected with hantavirus. Gurry Glass realized that this strain of hantavirus could be a slow, stealthy killer. It was probably killing people for decades, but so surreptitiously that no one had noticed it.
I think what this tells us about infectious agents and disease is that, in fact, infectious agents produce a broad range of illnesses, from very immediate, severe types of disease that we tend to think of to perhaps more long-term sorts of effects. We wouldn't have thought probably many years ago that, for instance, ulcers were caused by infectious agents. Most of us didn't think a few years ago that cervical cancer, one of the leading causes of cancer in women, was caused by an infectious agent, and yet we now know that they are.
The Hantavirus story reveals that viruses and bacteria work their mischief in a surprising number of ways. They can kill swiftly and surely in epidemics that make headlines. But they can also act slowly and insidiously in a way that is hard for scientists to detect. Viruses and bacteria have evolved with humanity over millions of years in an unseen world. Our modern society is just beginning to appreciate what the Navajo have taught for centuries. That life is a precarious balance between tightly interconnected worlds. We upset that balance at our own peril.
Premiering next on the Discovery Channel, a creature long dead is brought to life and all myths are dispelled. A portrait of the ultimate monster, the ultimate guide, T-Rex. Beginning next, only on the Discovery Channel.
Weed Be Gone from Ortho kills up to twice as many weeds as other brands, and it won't harm your lawn.
Finding the perfect house takes the support of people like Allison Wood of Coldwell Banker, who found one for Jim Miller, who recommended her to Denise Cruz, who forgot Jim's birthday, but did remember to recommend Coldwell Banker to the Hirschfelds after they found out they were having twins. Meet the professionals people count on at the Coldwell Banker Spring Open House celebration, going on now. Support you can count on from Coldwell Banker.
All across America, there to see us through. Just around the corner, a neighborhood Jiffy Lube.
Jiffy Lube. With 1,200 locations, we're always there when you need us. And we offer Pennzoil.
3,000 miles, you make us smile. America's Jiffy Lube.
Jiffy Lube, America's favorite oil change.
Go behind the scenes on real-life cases of terrorism, fraud, and forgery. Learn the secrets of the Crime Lab on Discover Magazine. Next Sunday at 9 Mountain, 8 Pacific on the Discovery Channel. Explore your world.
For all its playfulness, this children's rhyme originated with a terrible event, the plague. The rosy ring was a telltale rash. Posies were herbs and spices carried to ward off disease. And sneezes were the first symptoms of this deadly bacterial infection. Plague wiped out 1/3 of Europe's population in the 1700s. Even simple bacterial infections were fatal until antibiotics were developed. But the power of antibiotics is fading. Deadly bacterial infections are back, and they're targeting our children.
It happened very, very quickly. It was from a matter of waking up in the morning with a child that looked like he might have a virus to 4 o'clock in the afternoon being in the emergency room with a child who looked as if he might die at any moment.
I put him to bed that night, and he was wonderful. 5, 6 hours later, and my child's on the verge of dying.
And they told me that they didn't know if she would live for 30 minutes or 3 days or 3 weeks or what.
La Bonheur Children's Medical Center in Memphis, Tennessee is battling the new bacterial menace. Here, they're using every approach to healing. La Bonheur is fighting to protect children against new strains of bacteria that our drugs can't cure.
Somebody's been kissing on you.
Dr. Joan Chesney specializes in treating this growing threat to children's health.
Hi. Mrs. Harper, I'm Dr. Chesney. I'm with Infectious Diseases, and Mr. Harper, nice to meet you.
Savannah Harper has drug-resistant pneumonia and a blood infection. She's in critical condition.
We've been here about 13 days now. Mama's baby. Love you.
This is the culprit, a bacterium called pneumococcus. All kids carry these bugs. They not only cause ear and sinus conditions, but also life-threatening blood infections, meningitis, and pneumonia. And new drug-resistant strains are extremely difficult to treat, putting children like Savannah in serious danger. Angela Alexander was one of the first parents in this country to face the failure of antibiotics and the tragic results it can have on our children. Her daughter Shauna came down with pneumococcal meningitis, a serious brain and spinal cord infection. Even worse, the infection was drug-resistant.
She was started on antibiotics, and normally we would expect within about 2 to 3 days that the fever would be coming down and that she would become more responsive.
Her head was drawn back like this, and if you couldn't move it, it would break it if you moved her head, and all she kept saying was, "Mama, Mama."
It was only then that we asked the laboratory to do some very sophisticated testing to tell us whether this organism was in fact susceptible to the usual antibiotics. And it was at that point that we discovered that it was not.
And I looked down at her, and her eyes were rolled back in her head. And they made me leave, and they took her to ICU.
When we added a very potent antibiotic, she began to respond, but unfortunately with meningitis, the damage can be extensive fairly early on.
She stayed there and she never got better. She's blind, she can't hear. She just lays there. The only thing she does is breathe. She can't even eat.
What happened to Shauna? Her body rallied its defenses, like this white blood cell that engulfs and digests invading bacteria. But in serious infections like Shauna's, white cells are overwhelmed and many die. That's where antibiotics come into play. Penicillin, for example, causes bacteria to burst without harming human cells at all. The perfect magic bullet, until recently. Experts like Dr. Stuart Levy of Tufts University have watched the magic fade.
When we began using antibiotics, penicillin being the first, bacteria all over were susceptible. It was easy. Today, we find all these bacteria out there which are resistant not just to penicillin, but to many different antibiotics. Why? Because they've survived. They have found ways to not be touched by the antibiotic. While we're trying to target with our weaponry all of these bacteria, they're changing. It's almost like a video game.
The players in this life and death game are invading bacterial bugs, the body's white blood cell defenses, and antibiotic magic bullets. When bacteria invade, the body's white cells attack them and kill the infection. If the bacteria seem to be winning, antibiotic magic bullets are brought into play. The combined forces kill all the bacteria, even these red mutants that are immune. If the drug attack is stopped too soon, resistant bacteria survive. Now the first magic bullet isn't enough. So we change weapons. We fire new magic bullets until there are few weapons left in the arsenal. And this game never ends because bacteria are always out there, evolving.
And they keep changing, and they keep adding resistances. So in the end, you can end up with a bacterium resistant to 8 different antibiotics. There aren't too many left. There are no more buttons to push.
It's easy to see how. Much to parents' chagrin, infants and toddlers explore the world with their mouths and their hands. So kids constantly expose themselves to every bug carried by playmates. The more they take antibiotics, the more likely it is that resistant bacteria will appear and spread like wildfire.
During the past 3 or 4 decades, we've been fortunate in being able to have new antibiotics being discovered and put into use almost every year. In the present decade, the 1990s, there are no new antibiotics coming on market, and they won't be there probably, if we're lucky, into the next century. So we have to use the ones we have. Now, if we start using the newer ones, I mean, we've already started them, but the newer ones, as much as we've used some of the older ones, bacteria are going to become resistant.
Hello. Hello. How's she doing today?
The situation is a growing worry for Dr. Keith English, Director of Infectious Disease Research at Le Bonheur.
Fever, she's out running around today.
He believes that Shauna is just the beginning of a problem that is steadily getting worse.
There you go. Good. We emphasize in our education of medical students and residents in pediatrics that these changes in antibiotic susceptibility patterns require us to be constantly alert to the possibility that traditional treatments for many childhood infections may no longer be effective. Good. I'm so glad to see she's doing better. Thank you. You're welcome.
Young patients are doing better now, thanks to a new treatment strategy. Children with serious infections are treated with combinations of new antibiotics right from the start.
A double outlet right ventricle and started her on some broad spectrum antibiotics.
At the same time, the bacteria are tested for antibiotic sensitivity. Each of these paper strips contains a different antibiotic. By interpreting patterns of bacterial growth around the strips, doctors can see how effective each drug is against the particular strain in that patient. If the bugs are not resistant, doctors switch back to an older drug that can control the infection. If they are resistant, doctors keep hitting them hard with the latest antibiotics.
Hi, Dr. English.
I came to check on the...
This protects the patient and discourages new resistance.
No zone.
The new strategy has brought Savannah's drug-resistant pneumonia under control.
How's she doing today?
She's better since she's been extubated. She's afebrile.
Though still very weak, Savannah is on the road to complete recovery.
It's okay. It's all right.
The success of this approach is important because pneumococci aren't the only drug-resistant bugs around.
I have nightmares all the time about having to treat children with infections which are no longer susceptible to the available antibiotics.
So far, we've been lucky. Resistant bacteria have not become common outside of hotspots like Memphis. To keep it that way requires changing our attitude about using antibiotics.
We should not demand them of our physician. We should use them as prescribed. We shouldn't stockpile them, and we shouldn't give them to other people. If we do just that, we will prevent the overuse and misuse of antibiotics and will eliminate a major, maybe 50–60% of the problem of resistance due to antibiotic usage.
If you have not yet seen a serious infection due to an organism which is resistant, you will. If we don't very soon have vaccines that can prevent some of these infections and new antibiotics that can treat these infections, that we may well return to the pre-antibiotic era, at which time we can anticipate seeing children who are severely disabled and a number of children who may die of what used to be very simple to treat infections.
Here's a special free offer exclusively for viewers of this Discover Magazine show, with our thanks for watching. The oceans of Venus. Did they once support life similar to Earth? Startling revelations. Sex and scent. Does smell play the most important role in determining whom we marry? Where are our memories created? How does the brain store them? Why do we remember it all? Now viewers of this Discover Magazine show can get a free no-obligation issue of Discover Magazine simply by calling this number now. Discover shows you the unseen solar system, sheds new light on the origin of man and the mysteries of the past, and delivers a glimpse of life in the future. Call now for your free issue of Discover through this exclusive TV offer. Plus, reserve your free gift, Science on the Edge, packed with ideas that could change the world. Call now for your free issue of Discover. If you like it, subscribe and get 9 more issues, 10 in all for just $19.95. Plus, get Science on the Edge free when you subscribe. Call now.
Some people believe the world is getting smaller. At United Van Lines, we believe the world is still the same size. We've just helped to make it easier to get around. Let United show you how making a move to another country is a lot like making a move to another block. The same quality service that helped make us America's #1 mover has also made us one of the world's leading movers with over 1,000 agents worldwide. United Van Lines. Quality moves around the world.
Premiering next on the Discovery Channel. A creature long dead is amazingly brought to life, and all myths are dispelled. Opportunistic scavengers or vicious predators. Travel back 65 million years to learn the truth about the most misunderstood creature ever. Tony Barrett or Time Lizard King. A complete portrait of the ultimate monster. The ultimate guide, T-Rex. Beginning next.
Come see Volvo for '96 at New Mexico's #1 volume Volvo dealer, Santa Fe Volvo. Our low prices are bringing people from all over New Mexico and southern Colorado. Save on '96 Volvo 850 with state-of-the-art front-wheel drive, dual front airbags, and the world's first side impact airbag, plus available turbo engine. Santa Fe Volvo has the largest selection in New Mexico of '96 Volvo 850s and 960s in stock and ready for delivery. Nobody but nobody undersells Santa Fe Mazda Volvo Suzuki, corner of Cerrillos and Camino Carlos Rey.
You want to win? You gotta play. And it begins at Camel Rock Casino. From the moment you enter, you realize the difference at Camel Rock Casino. Slots, slots, and more slots. Our restaurant provides a superb setting for lunch or dinner. Camel Rock has it all. 21, live keno, craps, baccarat, poker, bingo, and roulette. See the difference. Come to Camel Rock Casino. 10 minutes north of Santa Fe on Highway 285.
One now.
This is a killer, and it's in your neighborhood. Mosquitoes have buzzed in our ears and left itchy marks on our skin ever since humans first roamed the earth. Most of the time, they're a minor irritation. But mosquitoes are more than a nuisance. Worldwide, 450 million people suffer from mosquito-borne illnesses. Malaria, a disease spread by mosquitoes, kills more than 2 million people every year. No other animal inflicts more death and disease on humans. The mosquito is everywhere, a stealthy presence roaming through our gardens and homes, seeking out its next blood meal. Some types of mosquito can sense the warmth of a living creature from as far away as 30 feet. Today, the mosquito is poised to bring an old scourge back to the U.S., dengue fever, a painful tropical disease that can be lethal. McAllen, Texas, a rapidly growing community on the U.S.-Mexico border. On the Mexican side, there's an epidemic of dengue, and McAllen is vulnerable because it has the right mosquitoes and the right conditions for breeding. The Centers for Disease Control is watching McAllen closely for signs of dengue's arrival in the U.S. Dengue is a hard disease to control because of the way it spreads. If mosquitoes bite a person who already has the disease, they pick up the virus and then pass it on to the next person they bite. It's a vicious cycle. The CDC is analyzing hundreds of blood samples from suspected dengue cases in Texas. It could enter the U.S. at any moment. The CDC is so concerned, they run a lab in Puerto Rico devoted to investigating dengue. Last year, Puerto Rico had over 24,000 suspected cases, so it's the perfect place to study the disease and the mosquitoes that carry it. Dr. Paul Ryder is an epidemic troubleshooter who works at the CDC's special lab in San Juan. Dr. Ryder raises 10,000 mosquitoes a week for research. Most of his work concentrates on one species, Aedes aegypti, or yellow fever mosquito, and one sex, the female.
You may find this strange to understand, but I find that the private life of the female mosquito very fascinating. The female mosquito is perfectly happy to feed entirely on blood. She gets her protein from blood, and she gets her energy from blood. And I suppose it's not so surprising when you think that she's living surrounded by blood.
The female is responsible for the nasty red welts on our skin. Only the females bite. The males feed on nectar. The female has an efficient feeding tool, a trough-like sucking device called a proboscis. She saws through the skin surface and probes for blood. Each plunge injects saliva under the skin. That's what causes itching, and since her saliva is home to the dengue virus, it causes infection too.
¿Cómo te sientes hoy? Bien. ¿Te sientes mejor? ¿Y el dolor de cabeza?
Dr. Jaime de Seda is an infectious disease specialist in San Juan. His young patient, Raisa, is recovering from dengue. She had very bad flu-like symptoms for about a week. But de Seda knows from his own experience that dengue can be much worse.
Yucky. I had high fever, I had sore throat, I have headaches and incredible body pains. It's called breakbone fever, and I can't understand why. It's very severe. So for a number of days I was in bed, I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything, I couldn't think straight. So it was quite severe.
Severe dengue, or dengue hemorrhagic fever, has Dr. de Seda worried about amaryllis. This is her second case, and her symptoms are worse than last time. There are 4 types of dengue fever, so you can get dengue 4 times in your life. Those who've had it more than once are most at risk for hemorrhagic fever. This form of the disease can lead to shock and death.
You still have a...
Dengue spread relentlessly because of the mosquito's amazing adaptability. There are 3,000 different species of mosquitoes in the world, each one shaped by the conditions of its own special habitat. In the forest, you can find their larvae in tiny pools of water inside bromeliads. The female mosquito is a breeding machine. She can lay up to 300 eggs after a blood meal. Dengue-carrying Aegyptes lay their eggs close to water, where the eggs rest until a rainfall occurs. When they are flooded, they begin to develop. Within a few days, eggs hatch into larvae. Within a week, they develop into pupae, the stage in which they change from aquatic creatures to airborne insects. At the end of that stage, the insect emerges in a matter of minutes. The adult lives for a few weeks. The dengue mosquito has tied its fate closely to that of humans. It prefers the artificial containers that we provide for breeding sites, funeral flower vases, spare tires, and bird baths are particular favorites.
It's really a very clever mosquito. It's adapted its life so closely to our life that really it has everything. It's like a boy in an ice cream store. It has its food close by, lots of people to bite. It has, unfortunately, lots of breeding sites to exploit. And it has wonderful resting sites. And it spends a lot of its time hidden away, resting indoors.
In Puerto Rico, mosquito control is serious business. Spraying insecticide and eliminating breeding sites are the standard responses to any outbreak of mosquito-borne disease. But those methods aren't working on the stealthy mosquitoes here.
I will build a motor car for the great multitude, constructed of the best materials by the best men and women to be hired. Any person making a good salary will be able to own one and enjoy with his family the blessings of hours of pleasure in God's great open spaces.
You know, FedEx and the Dream Team have a lot in common. They're fast, we're fast. They've got moves, we've got a few moves of our own. We both spend a lot of time in the air. They get called for traveling, we travel when we're called. They're masters at gravity-defying slam and jam and foul line dunk. Well, okay, so they got us there. FedEx, proud sponsor of the USA Basketball Dream Team. Neat, huh?
Now you don't have to wait to save on international calls. With MCI World Savings, you're guaranteed one low rate, 24 hours a day to each country when you call any number you've selected. Places like Japan, France, the United Kingdom, and Mexico City. That's MCI's lowest rate, day or night. So no matter where you call, you always save over AT&T. Call 1-800-999-4400 to join. MCI World, for citizens of the world.
Let the Discovery Channel be your connection to the internet. It's simple and the first month's free. Connect to Discovery Channel online. Call 1-800-554-4008 and you'll receive our free online startup kit. Call now to connect to the past and the future. Connect to places you've only dreamed of. Connect to people who share your passions. Call now and make the connection for our free trial offer. Discovery Channel Online. Connect.
Next, hear new theories about nature's deadliest hunter on the ultimate guide to T-Rex. Then examine the history of the dinosaur in the movies on Dinosaur Week. And authorities struggle to prevent child abuse on Justice Files. Coming up on the Discovery Channel.
Buenos días. Buenos días. Mire, somos...
Dr. Ryder and his associate, Manuel Amador, are determined to figure out why the standard control methods aren't working. Donning his bug-busting vacuum pack, Ryder is following the trail of the bloodsuckers into Puerto Rican homes.
The mosquito is often called the yellow fever mosquito. I think that we should rename it the tropical closet mosquito. It's a closet species. It lives and hides among clothing in closets more often than anything else in the house. To To expect an aerosol of insecticide that is really at the mercy of the nuances of wind movement to be delivered in quantity to a mosquito that's sitting among your clothing in the closet doesn't seem to make sense, does it?
Conventional ideas about controlling mosquitoes turn on basic assumptions about their egg-laying and flight behavior. It's assumed that after a blood meal, the female lays all her eggs at once. It's also assumed that she doesn't fly more than 100 yards from where she hatched. The renegade writer questions these assumptions, and he's come up with a clever way to track a gypsy in the wild. First, he feeds uninfected lab mosquitoes a good blood meal. It's laced with rubidium, a trace metal that the mosquitoes then leave behind in their eggs. Returning to the scene of their bug-busting exploits, they release a few dozen rubidium-marked mosquitoes. They leave egg traps at every other house in the neighborhood. The traps imitate the female's favorite breeding sites. Every day, Amador replaces the traps with fresh ones and takes the day's egg catch back to the lab. He meticulously counts the number of eggs left in each trap. Then he puts the eggs from that trap through an atomic emission spectrophotometer. As the machine vaporizes the eggs, various elements give off distinctively colored flames. So when the flame turns red, Amador knows that the eggs were laid by rubidium-marked mosquitoes. The results of the experiment are surprising. 24 rubidium-marked mosquitoes were released in front of one house in this neighborhood. The first day after release, rubidium-marked eggs were collected from 54 different sites, not 24 as expected. And on days 2, 3, and 4, the mosquitoes continued to lay eggs much farther than 100 yards from the release site.
When she's ready to lay her eggs, she doesn't lay all her eggs in one basket. Quite sensibly, perhaps, she distributes them around many different sites. And this takes quite a long time. It seems to take a number of days. We've deduced that the mosquito is actually flying quite long distances, much further than the 50 to 100 yards that's been generally assumed to be the case. This is very important from the point of view of the spread of disease as well as from the problems of control.
This is unwelcome news. It means that the normal ways of controlling the spread of dengue aren't working.
The more we learn, the more we realize that we may have to rethink our approach to control.
Recently, dengue crossed the Mexico border into Texas. More than 10 cases were confirmed, half acquired here in the United States. But the timing of the outbreak was lucky. Winter set in, the mosquitoes died, and dengue burned itself out, for now. But as spring returns, the threat of dengue and its deadly cousin, hemorrhagic fever, returns too. It could happen to any community in any state in the Southeast. Wherever this monster thrives, dengue follows.
When they're coming in to bite you, it's quite easy to tell them apart because the Egypti hovers around and is very timid and is not likely to land immediately and try to bite you. It also will go for body parts that are farthest away from where it thinks you would find it and hit it, like the ankles or underneath up your clothes or things like that. Whereas the albopictus, or the Asian tiger mosquito, will come in from quite a distance, select its landing spot, come right in, bite you. Usually, even if you start to swat at it, it will not fly away. If you move, it won't fly away. It's there to get its blood meal, and it's going to stick it out.